Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Test Automation 101, Desktop Application Testing with Ranorex Studio. I'm John Reynolds, Product Manager here at Ranorex, and I will be the moderator for this webinar. Our presenter today is Timothy McDaniel, Ranorex Pre-Sales Engineer. Before we begin, I do want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. Throughout the webinar, our team will be answering your questions in the Q&A panel. This is usually located in the upper right corner of the GoToWebinar window. This webinar is also being recorded so that you can watch it again later or share it with others on your team. Anyone who did register for the webinar should receive a link to the recording within around 48 hours after the session ends. Now let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. This webinar is intended for testers who are new to using Ranorex for test automation. So we're going to start with an introduction to the Ranorex Workspace and then walk through the steps to automate a test for a desktop application. Following the presentation, we will have a live Q&A session. So now I'm just going to hand off the presentation to Timothy so he can continue with the demonstration portion of today's webinar.
So when you first start Ranorex and it opens up, you see this pretty much this screen here that details a little bit, sort of some news information relating either to automated UI testing, also things that are specific to Ranorex as well. Whenever there's a new version, it will let you know that there's a new version out to download. It will let you know what your maintenance cycle is as far as when your maintenance will expire, which that will be reflected here. And down here, we've got some templates to get you started, sample solutions. There's some getting started videos, sort of a YouTube channel that shows you different videos to kind of help make things easier when you're learning the tool. Down here as well, we indicate what webinars are coming up. So whenever there's a new webinar coming up, it will be listed down here so that you can register for it. If you can't attend it live, as long as you've registered, you will get an email with a direct link to it so that you can watch it on demand at a later time. You can see over here, there's recent solutions. So basically, if you've worked on different solutions or different types of, if you have a list of them, they will appear under your recent solutions category, similar to like any of Microsoft products, for example, where they show you your recent documents over there. Right here, you have your start menu as far as new solutions via the wizard. That's the Rocket Start wizard that we're going to use. Once you get very comfortable with everything, if you want to just start with a new blank solution, or if the solution that you need is not under the recent category, then you can click the open solution and navigate to the path of where you've stored your projects, which by default is in your documents folder. There's a documents Ranorex folder where your projects are stored. Now, if you do not have internet access, which we do have some customers that they're a very secure, they're in a secure environment where they do not have internet access. Well, then of course some of these things are not going to show up here, but you can still access the same sort of things: recent files, recent projects, open a file, everything from the menu system up here as well. Also, when you first open up the installation, I think it does prompt you for whether or not you want to use the dark mode or the light mode. Right now, of course, I'm in the normal mode here. Tools options here would show, where you have a choice between light and I can say, dark mode here as well. Especially for what I actually do prefer dark mode most of the time, but when I'm doing the webinar, just to make things easier for the audience to see, I tend to use the light mode. So that's what we're going to stick with here. And we're going to go ahead and click on this new solution via wizard, which brings up the Rocket Start wizard. And in this Rocket Start wizard, you have a choice between the desktop, web applications. We support a number of different web browsers. such as Chrome, Firefox, and Edge Chromium or Chromium. So there's a number of different browsers that you can utilize. For mobile, we support iOS or Android for running tests against against those devices. Now, there's also for testing applications, and we also have an RX browser for testing websites and everything on the mobile devices. And then, of course, you can also build your test from scratch using a blank solution. However, if you were going to do that, you could probably have also used that option here, new blank solution. So what we're going to start off with here is a desktop solution. So we're going to click on that desktop. Once you click on that, it's kind of thinking here. There you go. And it comes up here, and from here we can create our new solution. Now, if you do not give it a name, it's just going to default to incrementing levels like my test 30 or something like that. We could say, call this just webinar demo. And by default, it's choosing this location under here of this for this projects folder, but I could just as well browse to a new folder, a new place to store it. It's recommended that you do keep this local on your device. If you have network, if you're trying to do this on your network, you could run into permissions or latency issues, things of that nature. So it's probably best to just have it default to here. When it comes to working in projects, like working in teams or things like that, that's where we suggest that you use some sort of source control methodology, such as GitHub or TFS or Subversion, something of that nature. And we do have wizards so that to help you set that up, so that way you can commit your changes to a repository, your other team members can pull and do those sorts of things. And that's probably the most ideal way of when you're working in teams together. Down here, we have additional options. And of course, you could change your project name if you wanted to, if you didn't want it to be the same as the solution name. And you can choose if you're going to get into the programming aspects, which we're not going to do for this webinar, because this is an introductory webinar. But you do have a choice of using C# or VB.NET. And basically, Ranorex is going to do all that coding in the background. So when you basically record your test cases and things like that, it's all done and it's transparent to you unless you go back and you look at the code, which you can do. And you have an option of adding a solution to source control if you wanted to here, or we can do this once we've gone through the wizard or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and continue here. And from here, it's looking at the open processes that we've got running so far. But we're going to browse for an application, and we're going to browse for the application that we want to test. In this instance, we are going to go to the demo folder, and we are going to go to this demo app here, RX demo app. This is Ranorex demo application. You can actually download this in our Getting Started on the Web. We provide this application for you to kind of test and go through our exercises with. However, too, when you are testing, once you kind of learned a bit and you know what you're doing, after you've kind of got started doing this, then it is good to test it against your applications and against your websites or whatever you're trying to test, and to see that it's going to identify all the things that you expect it to see, and that's going to behave accordingly. So let's go ahead and RX demo app. And mind you too, there's a 30-day free trial. So you're able to download the application from our website, test it out for 30 days. It's fully functional. You will be able to test everything out, make sure it's working, and make sure it's going to be suitable for your needs. So anyways, right here we have the RX demo app. If we wanted to add some arguments, we have that option to do so. Sometimes applications, there may be something that's inherent to your application or something that's needed where there are some arguments that need to be made, that can be done there. So we're going to continue here. Here it's asking, do we want to focus on a single application? Do we want to focus on multiple applications, or no focus applied? Now, the advantages of focusing on a single application or multiple is that Ranorex isn't looking at everything then. So especially when it comes to speeding up Ranorex, making sure that it's not looking everywhere for certain things, then you might want to focus on a single application or multiple applications. If you've got a super fast computer and everything, SSD drive, lots of RAM and processor speed, and you really don't care, then you can say no focus applied. However, that could result in inadvertent clicks or something in other applications and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the single application that we're doing today, and we're going to say continue. Now it's giving me a summary of what's transpiring, and we're going to finish. Okay, so now it launched the studio and our workspace here. It kind of started first steps in Ranorex Studio. It launched the application as well that we're going to be testing, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize this for a second. We're going to close this out. If you ever did need to see that again, you're like, oh no, I kind of really needed that for getting started. Well, we can go to view and bring it up again in first steps in Ranorex Studio, and it reappears up here again. But I'm going to close this out, and we're going to look at the workspace that we have today. Now here you have your projects, your different projects that you are the different files that's related to your project for Solution Web demo. Now I could right click on this and I could open the folder and explore, and I can see the different, the different files that are associated with this. Now, one thing to be warned, or best practice, is do not change names of anything here. Like you go like, oh, well, I wanted to name it something else, or I want to change some of the things here. It's best not to mess with anything in here, because Ranorex would not be aware of those changes, and it can't update the links and the pointers and things that will go to it. So that could cause a problem. Like if I go in here and I change this recording, which is a default recording module here, well, then that could break some things. So there have been people that have tried it, and it's kind of ill-advised. So I would not do that. Keep your changes, make sure they take place within here, or you can change the names down here as well. And then you can be assured that Ranorex is going to be aware of it. So here's the projects folder. Down here you have the module browser. This is where either your coding modules, if you are coding, or your recording modules are recorded down here. And of course, if you're doing mobile, they look a little bit different. They'll show you sort of an icon of a mobile device rather than this camera looking thing here. But these modules here, you can organize them as well. You can, we can go up and create additional folders up here. And if you have a lot of different recording modules, as your test cases grow and you have a lot more, then they can be well organized in here. Down here, you have your output, where you have your, when it compiles, because every time that you run this, it will compile the project into an executable. So you'll see the results down here of what's going on. And over here, you have your test suite, the test suite that you're creating. These things can be renamed to be suitable. Let's say you had multiple test cases. You could have like test case A, test case B, test case C. We could build them out down here to, and then we could choose, which one we want to execute, or do we want to run all of them, things like that. So you have that. And right here, we've got the start AUT. So one benefit of using the wizard is that it's kind of doing your setup and your teardown. Now you can add these manually as well, but it's kind of nice and beneficial to have the Rocket Wizard set those up for you. And under the start AUT, you can see right here, it's just, running the application, saying to run, that's the action. And it's navigating to that executable path, and it's basically going to start that up for us. And over here in the close AUT, it is closing the application. It's looking for the Windows by process ID, and it's closing that application. And so we've got those two set up, and down here is the recording. So it always sets up a default recording 1.rx rec to get you started. And down and over here, you'll see you've got the record button. You've got basically different actions that we can also add from the repository. Right now, the repository is blank because we have not recorded anything. But once you start recording, this repository starts getting populated, and you'll see all those different entries in here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and using this tool, we're going to go ahead and start recording. So we're going to go ahead and click the record button. And when you do that, it kind of shrinks this down or minimizes your application to show what's on your desktop. And you see down here, we have sort of this little Ranorex recorder panel down here to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. And you'll notice too is that because we've got this on this whitelist, where we've set up that we want it to focus only on this application, it's only seeing the elements in this application. When I'm even over here, or if I had other things on my desktop right now, there's nothing on my desktop. But if there was, you can see right here, I cannot click on those items. I've got this like, no, little, you can see a little circle with a slash through it, meaning, it's not going to record. So down here, we've got the bounding box. We're going to, that it's identifying the elements quite well in here because you can see right here the little red box kind of circling around each one. So that's a good indication that it sees everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the test database. And when you do that, you see that there's a click here. We can see what it did. If we accidentally clicked on it twice and we said, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I clicked on it twice and now I got two of them here. I can go ahead and just delete right here. I can delete it later too after the recording is finished. But right now, it's convenient. And when you're doing a recording, you can kind of take your time. The execution, when it plays back, it's going to play back much quicker than your actual recording. But you do want to be methodical. You want to be, think about what you're going to do and everything like that. Now, if you do get interrupted, let's say there's a phone call and someone wants, you need to check on your email, anything like that, I can pause this right here. And now I can go do other things and it's not going to interfere with my recording. If I click over here, do something, nothing's going to happen. It's not going to mess up my recording. Actually, it wouldn't click on here since we have this on our whitelist here. It would, and it's only focusing on this. It wouldn't record any clicks elsewhere. But if you get into a situation where you don't have that focus applied, then yes, you would get additional clicks and everything like that. So we're going to continue and we're going to come over here to this first name and click in the field here. I'm going to type in just some fictional name. We'll go John, last name, click in the field, type in Doe. We'll click over here in this drop-down menu and choose particular one of these items. So we'll say testing. Here I'm going to double click because there's a 0 already defaulted in here, and I can just like double click in here. And if I double click, what that does is it kind of highlights the items to make sure that I override it. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of put in some age, and we'll click on this radio button here and then say add entry. Now you can see it's recording all the different keystrokes, and that one that I said double click, you can see that it shows that it's a double click here and it shows where I clicked on that. So the next thing we want to do is we would like to do a validation. So we're going to say validate, and when you do validate, you have sort of a bounding box that goes around. I mean, the same kind of bounding box that you had before, but if you notice, it's a different color. It's purple to let you know you're in validation mode. What we want to validate is the number of entries. So the number of entries is 1 right now. We've got 1 record here. So we're going to click on this 1. When we click on the 1, it brings up the path of where it, the Ranorex path, or the path that it went, the X path of where this element was. And if we click to retrieve screenshot, it shows 1. That looks good to us. The validation steps is, you take a couple steps to go here, you go next, and now we can look at the different attributes exist. We could use any of these attributes that we have, but really what we want to capture is the text of 1. So we'll say, okay, that's good. And we're going to say, okay. It goes back to the record mode. Something else to note too, there are things like image-based recording. The image-based recording is really for, let's say you get into situations where there isn't an element path, or not a very good element path. It's an image. You want to validate, let's say, some sort of canvas object or something like that. So image-based recording is available. We also have these hotkeys. The hotkeys is to, of course, you can press V to start validation mode. Probably one of the big ones in here that I see people use, and I've used myself, is to press M to record a mouse movement. Sometimes you have flyout menus in web browsers or something where there's not really a click action, but you need to maybe capture the movement from one location to the other location. And then it goes out again, and you navigate to another one. So you're doing the mouse movements. So these hotkeys are available. There's one for tool tips and tooltip elements, and also let me see, press I to record image base. So you have basically different little things that you can do there as well. So we're going to stop the recording at this point. And you will see that we have a number of different actions in our actions table now. And if you look down here, we have a number of repository items with the path that it was used to find that object. So every action up here is tied to a repository item. You will see that there, and it's kind of clicking. If you look at each one, you can see what it's linked to. Showing you a screenshot here of where. If you use the mouse button or the middle, the mouse scroll bar, you can zoom in, zoom out. I can zoom in and zoom out on any of these. That's really good, especially if you're like me and, kind of have some visual impairments here, or visual impairments. Then I can zoom in and I can see a little bit better of what's going on there. So when you're looking at this over here, you can see the different actions, like I said, that we took. And I can reorganize these if I needed to. I can, move things around here. Normally, you're going to want to keep this in the sequence that your test case, the way that you expect your test case to be. Technically, yes, you could enter the department first. You could go from the bottom to the top. It doesn't really matter in that regards. You definitely wouldn't want to hit the submit button, the button add person, before you've done what you need to do. And you probably would not want to validate before you did something else either. Here as well, we have the ability. Now you'll notice there's this run button up here, and there's this run recording here. Over here, you've got a run button as well. The difference between this run recording and this right here is, if we run the recording here, it's just going to run the current recording. It's not going to run the entire thing. It's not going to start the application. It's not going to close the application. If there were other recordings here, it would not deal with any of those. So this right here will just run the recording that we have, which means that I would have to ensure that my application is already open. Probably I would need to make sure that I deleted this out myself, because now, of course, if I closed it and reopened it, it would no longer be there. But I would have to also make sure that if I needed to, like if I was recording from just this tab, that it's already preset to this tab. Now, that's the first action we have on here. So really, you don't need to do that. But you also have the ability to say, okay, I want to run from here. Now, of course, if that's the case, I'd have to make sure that it's on the proper tab to continue. I could also say there's ability to run to here. So I could come down here, I'd say run to here, excluding the selection. I could go up here and click on, shift control or control shift. And so, shift down arrow and select maybe a number of items that I want to run. So this is useful, especially if your test is kind of lengthy and you're trying to get one area to function that for some reason is having some issues. Then you can go ahead and just test those items out. Just be aware that you've got to kind of stage it. You've got to set it up to where you want it to start that recording or start playing back that recording, and that it can, that it's on the proper place, the proper location that it needs to be. So if we, for example, ran this recording from here, we're going to run it from the top. I have the application already open. So we're not running this entire thing. We're just running this recording, local recording. And we say run recording. We're going to just basically say run recording. You'll see this come up here. Clicked on the test database tab and entering the data. And it's adding the entry. And the test completed. And it said recording 1 success, and kind of gives us everything that it did. It even did the validation step. And it said the attribute text development for web demo repository does match the specified value. So text equals 1, that's what it was expecting, and that's what existed there. So we're going to close this report out. You'll notice that all your reports kind of store in this a little area here. The reports, you can customize these reports. You can actually save them as HTML files. You can save them, by default, it's like an RX log file. You can save them as PDFs. You can have it saved as a PDF so that if you needed to send the report to someone, there's the capability of doing that. But let's get back to here now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to close this app out just to show you the difference. Now we're going to record, we're going to play back the entire thing of this test case. So we're going to run it. Now you see it's compiling it, creating the test, and running it. Pretty much doing the same thing. The difference is that there's a startup and a teardown. There you go, and it shows. It looks a little different. Ran the whole thing, shows you a test case. If you had multiple test cases, and let's say you were running them in sequence, then it would show, right here you see green because there's just one test that we're contending with at this moment. But if there were multiple cases and let's say one of them failed or anything like that, then this pie chart might look a little bit different and it would kind of indicate what the deal was on that. We expand the details. Here, it's kind of showing you all the information as before, but it's breaking down these sections. You have the start AUT recording, you have the general recording here, and you have the teardown. So that is the difference. Now, one thing we can do, and it's pretty simple here, maybe we want to also take a screenshot of this. So we can kind of come up here and we can drag this repository item up. Let me see if I can. Let me try that one more time. There you go. and we capture a screenshot of that. Maybe we'll capture also a screenshot of the entire application. So we'll capture a screenshot of that as well. And that way we'll get a screenshot of it. And let's go ahead. It's not that long. So we'll run this one more time to give you an indication of what that's going to look like. And you notice how once the item is in the repository, you can recreate different actions. I could go up and create a new test case without doing the record button. I could go and take those actions like the keyboard entry of that element, and I could say, okay, I want to do a keyboard entry for this. Another one, another item, I could sit there and like the age, go and drag that up. And I can also edit these fields as well. Like if I wanted to say, change John Doe to a different name, I had the ability to do that. Now let's expand the details, come down here. You can see it did screenshot. It's a tiny number, so it's a little fuzzy when it's blown up into an image right there, but you get the idea of it. And you're also able to bring up a screenshot of the entire application. Went over here, and this is where I was talking about if I wanted to change this to like, Jim, I can go ahead and edit that field. And I could even change that to Jim Smith. And I could change this to 45, change these fields out to be something a little bit different. I could also re-record. I could go ahead and say, well, I need to insert something else in here, and I can record from here. Now, if I just hit record by default, those recording actions will be placed at the bottom, and it will continue on. But, if there was something I needed in my test that I didn't get, I have that ability. This recording after this selection and go ahead and continue on with making my test case. So basically we have these items here and we played it back now, but what happens, let's say if all of a sudden the validation fails? Well, we can go ahead and test that just by making a minor correction to the test, or not minor correction, a minor edit here, just basically saying that it's 2. So we're going to go ahead and run this again. It's compiling and launching the test. And you will see that it's also going to make those changes as far as the name is concerned as well. Now it's trying to basically do the validation. You can see there was some red here. The test case failed. I can come down here and it took a screenshot. It said that does not match the specified value. The actual is 1. The expected is 2. And that's why it failed. So I can jump to this item. And that's a nice feature here too, as any of these little line items, I can jump to the item to go immediately to that action step. So I'm going to jump to the item on this, and basically it kind of highlights the line of where this failure occurred. So I can easily make that correction here. Another way to do this as well, so that your test doesn't necessarily fail, but let's say you have a lengthy test and you want to see what's going to happen, I can go ahead internal maintenance mode here. Internal maintenance mode, you'll see this little line up here. And what this will give me the ability to do is to correct it, at least temporarily, in the process so that I can let the test continue and make that change temporary, and then I will know to go back and fix it later. So we're going to go ahead and let this run again. We didn't change the validation to make it correct. So it's going to kind of begin to fail on that part as well. And here the maintenance mode comes up and it says, hey, attribute text of element for item. It was expecting that, well, the actual was 1, but it was expecting 2. So it's asking me, what do I want to do? Now, of course, I can inspect this in SPY, and SPY is outside the scope of this webinar, but the SPY tool is used to, it comes with Ranorex, and it helps you to be able to find items and track items and add them to your repository. It's sort of an investigative tool when you're trying to get things to function as you expected. So there's some benefits to that. And over here, we can say, okay, we can apply and retry. We can abort it. We continue with the error. But we're going to go over here and just change this to 1 and say apply and retry. So now you see it says it passed, but you've got it noted here that you were in maintenance mode. And if we expand the details of this, we can see where the error occurred and retrying with a new value of 1. And again, we can jump to the item. Now, so just remember, this doesn't really make the correction. It lets you use to temporarily correct so that it can continue on and pass the test. But if I wanted to make this correction more permanent, I would switch it back to 1. So, and notice here too, under validate, I've got attribute equals, but you could set different types of validations, something exists or not exist, or attribute is not equal. You can use regular expressions or attribute contains, attribute not contains, things like that. So there's different options that you can explore with this tool to get the type of validation that you're seeking. So right here, we've got this, and we've got our repository items. We've got, we've created screenshots, things of that nature. The other thing that you can do, especially if you get a lengthy test, you might want to break your test into different modules. So that's a best practice, especially when it comes to maybe reusing those modules, those recording modules here for different types of tests. Maybe you want to do like a quick smoke test where it just opens up the app and closes it, or opens up, maybe enters just a name and that's it, or something like that. You can break these tests, these recording actions, into different recording modules. So let me give you an example here. So if we come down here, we've got test database. Well, maybe you've got other tests that are going to associate itself with some of the other different tabs. So maybe this action of selecting the test database is something that you want to break into a separate module. So we're going to kind of say, right click on this and say move to a new recording module, and we will call this one select test. There we go, select test DB, create. And when I do that, it creates a new recording module called select test DB. It's got its own little individual line item here, and it took it out of the recording module. The next one, what we'll do, we won't break this down to every little field. That would be kind of crazy at this point. And maybe you would want to do that if you just want to deal with names or something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and take everything that has to do with adding a record. So we're going to take it down to 10. So if I go to 1 to 10 and say move to a new recording module, we'll call this add records or add record, and we'll say create. And that takes that out and puts it in its own little recording module. So now all we have left here is in our recording module is the validation piece and plus the screenshot. So I don't think we need to break this out any more than it is. I'm going to go ahead and save everything that we've got here. And what we want to do is just rename this recording. So I'm going to I could say there's certain reserved words that will not let me name this. I think validate's one of them. See, validate is not allowed. So because it would use it would cause compiling error. So instead we'll say validate count. You can do that. Validate count, or you could say check count, something like that, right? And it will let me change it to that. So now I've renamed the modules. There's no longer that default recording one. But if I go back to my test case, the only thing I have in here is the validate count. So I've got to re-add this. I'm going to go ahead and turn off maintenance mode here. And what we need to do is we need to add the select tab. That needs to be in here. We need to add a record. Oops. Go back to this one. Add a record. And validate count. So basically, we kind of broke this up into individual pieces that we can go ahead and run this test again. And let's see how well it works now that we've kind of rebuilt the test into different modules. So we can say run. Now it's going to recompile the test and execute it. So now, let me see, it has a problem with it. You know what? That's the problem. We never corrected this. So I thought I did, but maybe I didn't. So that's why that failed. So we're going to run it one more time. This time round, it should pass. I know we temporarily changed it during the maintenance and then we jumped to the item, but maybe I did not change it back to the one like I thought I did. Maybe I said that I was going to, maybe forgot to hit enter or something that made it not stick. Okay, this time it's looking better. All green. And that, that compile or that little little window that pops up, the little shell, kind of advises, kind of lets you know what's going to transpire. If you start seeing some hesitance, some delays, and also you start seeing red in there, you know something's up. But if everything's green, just normal characters are green, then you know you're kind of that everything's going to be okay. So if we come down here again, it's showing everything we've done. Everything is as it should be. We've tested this. There's some other things that you can do that we're not going to delve into in this particular webinar, but there is the ability to do data-driven tests, meaning that I can have outside sources such as a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet or even a SQL table, so that I could, instead of having a static John Doe or something like that, I could add variables so that I could have that bound to one of those files and be able to run a data-driven test to populate the fields and everything that I would need. So that, you do have the capability of doing that as well. So this concludes the demo portion of the webinar. Do note that you can download the free trial from our website, and you can also click on the support link, go to the Help Center, navigate down to the Ranorex Studio user guide, starting off with the Ranorex Studio fundamentals. This will guide you through learning how to use Ranorex and getting started. And then we go to the advanced functionality and even the expert. There's all sorts of different, there is a wealth of information here for teaching you how to use Ranorex, for creating your UI test cases, and being able to make sure that you can use Ranorex successfully.
All right. Thank you very much, Timothy. We will go on to try to answer some questions live. So let's see what we have. Jacob has been answering a lot of questions through the chat console, but let's see what else we have here. So. Jacob, do you have a question that you want to answer? A lot of questions are rolling in here right at the end, so apologies. So for one of the questions here, we have, can we quickly show what the generated C# code is? We don't have an example up at the moment. Timothy did a lot of this recording ahead of time for this webinar. If you give me a moment, I may be able to just pull up an example of some C# code. I'm just launching Ranorex at the moment. Actually, I'm having issues on my computer. Just bear with me just a moment. Jacob, do you want to answer a couple questions live while I get my Ranorex up and running?
Absolutely. Thanks, John. First question I see is in regards to interacting with dynamic elements, specifically in a grid view, but this would also pertain to other applications. A lot of web applications that are JavaScript heavy, this would be relevant for. In this case, what I would recommend is looking at a grid view or some type of table where objects can change location depending on filters and sorting. I would say that generally there is some type of an accessibility property that will identify the inner text or the innermost component of a given cell in a data table. So I would recommend using that. If possible, that's going to be the easiest thing to do. If not, if those accessible properties aren't available, then sometimes what we'll need to do is to work around the limitations of the application by either using filters so that we know for a fact what's going to be presented in the table, or by using the sort features that are available in lots of table frameworks, so that we can grab the appropriate object based on the row number or the column number. Sometimes those are most helpful. In regards to the second portion of the question, what happens if a control takes more time than expected to load between various mouse actions? This is another really common one. And what we do in situations like this, we really try to make sure that two things. Ranorex will, by default, wait up to 30 seconds per level. So the document object model basically gives us 30 seconds per level that Ranorex will wait and look for an object. But if you have situations where you're going to be waiting longer than 30 seconds, potentially for a report to load, or you're waiting for a back-end process to complete, in a situation like that, I would definitely recommend the wait for method. So if you're in the action panel, if you click on the add button just under the record button, there are a whole bunch of options in there, and close to the bottom there's going to be one that's called wait for. And basically what that allows you to do is it allows you to tell Ranorex, I don't want you to do anything. We need to wait for a certain object to become available before we continue on in our recording. So I hope that's helpful information. A couple other questions that I'll hit real quick. There's a request for a beginner webinar. I would definitely recommend that you guys check out all of our previous webinars, and those are located at ranorex.com/automated-testing-webinars. I'll put that in the comments here, but you can also find that on our website simply by going to ranorex.com, clicking on support, and in the drop-down window that comes up there, the third option is webinars. There are a lot of topics that a lot of folks have asked about in this call today. I would definitely recommend you check that page out. There's lots of really great information there. Looking through some of the other questions. Oh, John,
Yep.
Are you ready to go?
I am good to go now. I apologize. I'm using a different computer and I had a license key expire. So let me see if I can share my screen. Can I get permission to share? There we go. So now let me know when you see my screen here.
I can see you, John.
All right. So we have the chat console. Let me close that out. So here I am in one of our sample solutions for, say, the KeyPass test suite. So this is our sample desktop solution. So if I open up a recording here, so I'll just open up the add recording entry. So this gives me all the recording steps. So if I want to see some user code, I can right click on the item and hit View User Code. I can also hit Control Enter. You can also convert it to user code and make modifications as well. So if I just hit View User Code, this will show all of the C# code. This is actually the C# code for the entire recording. But as you see here, it uses various items in the log recordings along with various actions here in the C# code. So there's my add entry option here as well. Were there any other requests for seeing user code or anything else inside Ranorex Studio? Am I still audible?
Going through. Yep. I'm
okay.
going through everything right now. Just a second.
Yeah,
sorry about
it looks
that.
like we probably had 50 questions come in late, so.
Yep. There are a few other questions. It looks like most of these, I don't know that we're going to have time to answer. But again, there are a couple other ones. For those of you who we can't get to questions for today, simply due to time constraints, if you're a current customer, please reach out to our support team. We'd definitely like to get a little bit more information. I'm going to put a link in the chat for everyone to be able to access the support page. Definitely drop your questions in there. For those of you that are currently looking at Ranorex or thinking about potentially a new solution for Ranorex, I definitely recommend that you reach out to the solutions engineering team. I'm going to drop their email address here in the chat as well. That's just evaluation@ranorex.com. Oh, yep, and there it is on the page there. Thanks. Definitely, that'll allow us to get a little more information from you guys, because unfortunately, the webinar isn't always the best place for a lot of these in-depth questions, just due to the format. But I definitely see there are quite a few in here. We're also going to have a record of all of these questions, and we're going to do our best to follow up with you after the fact as well. So if there are any, again, I'm still looking through questions that are still coming in.
We did have one question from Alexander, which I did answer in the chat, but can you record multiple apps with Ranorex at once? Like some changes in a database app, then I want to validate the outputs in another app, which is working with the database. And yes, that's definitely possible. You can use Ranorex to automate and validate across different applications. So you could validate something, like you said, using a database app and then validate the output in a separate application. And you also do not necessarily need to use Ranorex only for testing. So you can use Ranorex to automate items outside of testing and test validation. So Ranorex, as long as the tool can be automated with Ranorex, you can perform actions across multiple tools. Another question from Ad about how do you support timing issues such as sleep and wait? There are listeners for different events. You can also add a simple delay inside your Ranorex recordings to add a millisecond delay, multiple second delay, or whatever kind of delay you need between actions, as well as the support for different listening events.
There is a really good question here from Tony. Thanks, Tony, for your question. I really appreciate it. And it says, what would I need to save in terms of files in case my PC died, so I can just reinstall Ranorex on a new PC and have everything back to the way it was on my old PC? And that's an excellent question. We definitely recommend source control if that's something that you're familiar with. I would highly recommend that you look into Git Subversion or Team Foundation version control. So if you're using GitLab or GitHub or you have a repository set up in Azure or something like that, I would definitely recommend that, just so you have a separate location for all of the Ranorex projects. If you're not comfortable with something like that, what you can always do within Ranorex Studio, if you go up into the tools, there's an option in there that says compress solution. And what that will do is it'll actually create a zipped copy of your current project, and then it'll open up the Windows Explorer and highlight that file for you. You can take that file and put it on a flash drive, put it on a shared network drive, just somewhere that you can access it in the event that your computer does go down. Those are all the necessary and required files for the solution that Ranorex will need. So great question, Tony. Really appreciate that. So again, highly recommend some type of version control if you have it. If not, I would use that compress solution and open folder option often.
All right, it looks like we are pretty much at the time, and there are a lot of questions here. So we would recommend reaching out to our team for any questions. As Jacob mentioned, if you have questions that we did not get to answer, we do have a lot of recorded webinars available. So if there was a topic specific that you would like to look at, such as data-driven testing or various integrations, we likely do have that documentation on our webpage. And we are planning more webinars. We do hold 1 or 2 webinars a month on various topics. So once again, thank you everyone for attending, and you all have a great afternoon or morning or evening, whatever it may be.